My name is Lauren Mitchell. I'm 35 years old, and that night, I was seated at the farthest end of a white silk-covered table in the grand ballroom of the Fairmont Grand Chicago. This was our family's annual reunion dinner, a high society performance disguised as a meal where accomplishments were paraded and judgments served alongside wine. As always, I was assigned the seat furthest from the spotlight, a quiet reminder of my place in the Mitchell hierarchy. My older sister Madison held court at the center like royalty. She always did perfect blonde hair designer Prada dress and a smile so sharp it could draw blood. Every time her eyes met mine, I could practically hear her internal monologue. Still the same invisible failure, huh? My father, Charles Mitchell, didn't bother hiding his impatience. He checked his Patek Philippe watch like every second spent in my presence was one he'd never get back. My mother, Evelyn, wore her practiced social smile. She never openly insulted me, but her silence often echoed louder than words. They had no idea who I really was. For 10 years, I've worked in the shadows leading classified federal operations. To them, I was the middle daughter with a boring government desk job. But what was about to happen, well, it would upend their entire sense of reality. And the irony, it wouldn't even come from me. It started with a look from Lily Madison's 16-year-old daughter, whose eyes were far sharper than anyone gave her credit for. I hadn't realized she'd seen me months ago giving a school assembly under an entirely different title federal agent. I never expected her to be the one to crack the facade wide open at a $1 million dinner filled with false compliments and overpriced red wine. In the Mitchell family, everyone had a clear role. Madison was the star. From day one, she was the embodiment of success valedictorian homecoming queen, and now a marketing executive for a luxury cosmetics firm with a Manhattan office that overlooked the skyline. Her Instagram was a shrine to jet-setting yachts, champagne, and hashtags like Chalk, Power Lunch, and Jet Set Life. Then there was my younger brother Ryan. At 32, he was the golden boy. An architectural wunderkind with skyscrapers in Miami and Dallas bearing his signature. Dad practically bragged about him at every country club brunch like Ryan's career validated the entire Mitchell bloodline. And me, I was Lauren, the middle child, the invisible one, the one with the simple government job as they like to phrase it. I graduated from a state university they never bothered to remember, and in their eyes, I was the family oddball, the one who didn't fit, didn't shine, didn't matter. Every holiday, the same backhanded compliments resurfaced. Well, at least your job's stable, or I could pull some strings to get you into my firm maybe as an assistant. Said with smiles, yes, but laced with pity so thick it nearly choked me. I'd learned to smile back, nod politely, and say nothing. Partly because discretion was part of my job, but partly because I'd once hoped that maybe one day they'd actually see me, really see me. Tonight was no different. No one asked how I was. No one inquired about my work or where I lived. To them, Lauren had chosen the quiet life, and that meant she no longer required attention. What they didn't know was this: I'd sat in federal war rooms. I'd walked through cartel warehouses in El Paso, Miami, and Bogota, not as a tourist, but as an operator. I'd spoken fluent Spanish to top police commanders, and once negotiated a sting that saved over 200 lives. And tonight, as they clinked glasses and bathed each other in glittering praise, I sat back quiet, composed, and waited for the moment their perfect narrative would come crashing down. When I told my parents I worked for the Department of Justice, they didn't ask for details. Steady work, my mother said with a soft nod, her eyes already drifting away like the topic wasn't worth lingering on. My father gave a distracted then went back to scrolling his phone. I hadn't lied. I did work for the Department of Justice. I just didn't tell them the real part. I was a federal agent with the DEA trained at Quantico, embedded in some of the most high-risk operations targeting transnational drug networks. I was recruited straight out of undergrad, top of my class, with a thesis on cybercrime that caught someone's attention. While my family imagined me pushing paper in a cubicle, I was suiting up in tactical gear, briefing agents and debriefing confidential informants in dimly lit cafes along the border. I've worked in cities my parents only hear about when there's a headline, Juarez, Medellin, New Orleans. I've lived on 2 hours of sleep-swapped burner phones weekly and used 6 different identities during one long-term sting. Once during a financial tracing op against a Colombian cartel, I checked my phone after a 17-hour shift and saw a family Christmas photo on Facebook. They were smiling, toasting wine. The caption read, "Wishing Lauren could take a break and come home more often." I saw it from a hotel room in Miami where the walls were bulletproof and my shoulder was bleeding from a botched takedown. And I said nothing. Not because I didn't want to share, but because I knew they wouldn't believe it. Worse, they wouldn't care. In their minds, I was always the invisible daughter. But to the government, I was the lead financial investigator on Operation Silver Crescent, a $200 million heroin ring moving through the port of Houston. And I'll admit it, there was a strange satisfaction in staying silent. When they mocked my cozy little apartment, I thought of my Lincoln Park condo bought in full, no mortgage, no help. When they offered me admin jobs, I remembered standing before the Department of Justice presenting cross-border laundering patterns. They thought they knew me. But for 10 years, I'd lived a life they couldn't begin to imagine. Dinner began as always with small talk, wrapped in fake warmth. Traffic on Lakeshore Drive, the overpriced truffle pasta, the usual dance of compliments. I sipped my sparkling water, playing the part of Lauren the Invisible with practiced ease. Then came the Mitchell family's favorite tradition, the success parade. Madison kicked it off, obviously. She spoke about her luxury cosmetics campaign launching in Milan, each word perfectly polished like a PR script she'd rehearsed in the mirror. "It goes global next month," she added, spinning her wine glass between her fingers, like she was narrating a Vogue feature. Dad beamed and clapped her on the shoulder, voice booming, "That's my girl." Everyone raised their glasses. I kept picking at my arugula salad. Ryan followed up with his award-winning high-rise in Dallas, named The Future of Urban Architecture by Architect Digest. Mom looked like she might cry from pride. Aunt Karen launched into a monologue. "That boy's going places. Always has been destined for greatness." And then like clockwork it came. "So Lauren," Uncle David asked, feigning interest. "Still at that office job with the government or something?" Before I could answer, Dad jumped in, his tone flat but firm. "She keeps the paperwork flowing. It's important. Not exactly world-changing, but useful." Madison leaned forward, smile glinting with sharpened edges. "My company's hiring admin support," she said casually. "Honestly, Lauren, you'd be perfect. Way better pay than whatever you're scraping by with." Aunt Karen added with syrupy pity, "Not everyone's meant to do something big, honey. Simple's fine too." I forced a polite smile. Years of DEA training kicked in, face neutral, voice steady, heart rate low. No one could tell that just that morning I'd reviewed encrypted bank transfers from Hong Kong, tied to a fentanyl shipment scheduled to land in Houston. That the phone in my purse had biometric encryption and connected me to national ops centers. That this so-called paperwork job had helped shut down a major cartel pipeline. They thought I was enduring the moment. What I was really doing was waiting. I was about to respond to Madison's latest jab with some empty pleasantry when I noticed Lily staring at me, her daughter, 16. Too perceptive for her age, and far too sharp for her surroundings. Her gaze wasn't casual anymore. It was searching, focused, connecting dots no one else at that table even knew existed. At first I told myself it was nothing, a trick of the light. Maybe she was just zoning out. But then Lily tilted her head, squinted slightly, and her lips parted like she'd just remembered something important. My stomach sank. I knew that look. I'd seen it in cartel meetings when someone recognized a face they weren't supposed to. I'd seen it in low-lit cafes in Tijuana when an informant finally realized who was really sitting across from them. And now I was seeing it in a teenage girl across a silk-covered dinner table in downtown Chicago. I'd completely forgotten the North Shore Assembly. Months ago, I'd spoken at a private high school in Evanston, part of our outreach initiative. I'd stood under fluorescent lights presenting charts on drug trafficking routes and laundering networks under the name Agent Mitchell. Apparently Lily had been in the audience, and now here in the glittering haze of wine glasses and luxury, she was putting it all together. "Welcome back, Federal Agent Mitchell," she announced, voice bright, proud, and as devastating as a grenade tossed into a boardroom. Madison's wine glass hit the table with a loud clink. Dad froze mid-sip. Mom choked on her water, coughing into her napkin like it might hold the moment in place. Aunt Karen's mouth dropped open. Uncle David blinked slowly. Ryan's fork hovered in midair. The room stopped, breathing. Lily pressed on, oblivious to the bomb she'd just set off. "You're the one who came to our school, right? You showed us the maps, the money trails, all the cartel stuff. It was so cool." I sat perfectly still, pulse pounding, but face calm, every ounce of my DEA training focused on controlling my expression. This wasn't how they were supposed to find out. Not here. Not like this. But now there was no more hiding. I wished I could rewind 3 minutes. Just 3. But it was too late. Lily's words, Federal Agent Mitchell, still echoed in the air, hanging like smoke above a silent battlefield. Every pair of eyes zeroed in on me, not with pity, not with dismissal, but with disbelief, suspicion, and something dangerously close to respect. "Is this some kind of joke?" Madison spoke first. Her voice sharp-pitched higher than usual. Lauren Dad corrected himself quickly. "What's going on here?" Mom said nothing, just stared, wide-eyed, fingers trembling slightly as they clutched her glass. I took a deep breath. "It's not a joke," I said clearly, calmly. "I'm a senior agent with the Drug Enforcement Administration. I've held that position for 10 years. The silence that followed was absolute. No clinking glasses, no shifting chairs, no chewing. Just stillness. Madison laughed, but it wasn't joyful. It was a short, bitter scoff. "You're telling us. You're actually a federal agent with guns and raids and all of that." I didn't flinch. "Show us," she said, arms folded across her designer blazer. "Let's see the badge." Dad nodded. "Yes, let's see it." Without a word, I reached into my purse. Fingers steady. I pulled out the leather badge wallet, paused for a second. This was it. Then flipped it open and laid it gently on the table facing them. The gold DEA badge caught the chandelier light like fire. My photo name, federal ID, and embedded hologram glowed quietly beside it. Madison picked it up first. Her usually steady hands trembled as she read the card. "This is real," she whispered. Dad took it next, inspecting it from every angle as if still hoping to find a flaw. But there wasn't one. His expression shifted away from doubt towards something else. Recognition. Maybe even admiration. Mom didn't say a word. She just stared at the badge, then back at me as if she were rewatching the last 10 years in her head with a brand new lens. And this was only the beginning. No one said a word for a solid 30 seconds after I placed my badge on the table. Everyone just froze. Like if they stayed still long enough, the truth might evaporate, and they could go back to their safe, curated version of who I was. I'd seen that look before, in sting operations when suspects realized the game was over, when the facade collapsed and truth took over. But I never thought I'd see it on the faces of my own family. "Lauren!" Mom finally broke the silence, her voice thin, almost brittle. "You've been doing this for 10 years, and no one in this family knew." I nodded once. "For safety, and because I knew you wouldn't understand." Madison still held the badge, her grip uncertain now. The smirk was gone. "So, what exactly have you done? I mean, what kind of cases?" I glanced at my glass before answering, my voice shifting into briefing mode. cartel takedowns, money laundering trails, cross-border trafficking investigations. Most recently, I led Operation Silver Crescent. It dismantled a heroin pipeline worth $200 million through the port of Houston. Ryan blinked, clearly processing that number and the fact that it came from me. Wait, Aunt Karen said softly. You mean, it's actually dangerous? I hesitated, then decided they'd earned the truth. Yes. Last year, a Miami raid went sideways. I took a bullet right here. I reached up slowly and tugged the collar of my dress aside, just enough to reveal the faint but unmistakable scar along my shoulder. It missed the artery by less than an inch. Gasps rippled around the table. Mom's hand flew to her mouth, a muffled cry escaping. Madison's fingers tightened around the badge. No one touched their food. No one spoke. I looked at them, all this family that never really saw me. That night I continued. You called to ask why I didn't come home for Christmas dinner. I told you I had the flu. No one laughed, not even Uncle David. They just sat there. I used to imagine this moment, what it would feel like to finally be seen. But I never imagined the cost would be a bullet wound and 10 years of silence. No one spoke for a long time. There were no more clinking forks, no more bragging stories. Just silence stretching across the linen-covered table like a quiet reckoning. I watched their eyes shift, no longer looking at me like the invisible one, but like someone they'd never truly seen until now. Mom broke the silence first. Her voice was barely more than a breath. Why didn't you tell us sooner? I looked her in the eye. Because every time I tried to explain who I was, you'd already decided who I wasn't. I turned to Madison, who was now fiddling with her napkin, her mask of poise slipping. You called me a nobody tonight. Right here in front of everyone. You think that didn't land? That I didn't hear it every single time you said it with a smile? Madison lowered her gaze. Her fingers trembled slightly. I thought I was pushing you to be better, she said softly. I didn't realize I was pushing you down. You never asked what I actually do, I said. You never cared to know. Dad sat back, his posture no longer commanding, his hands wrapped tightly around his untouched whiskey. I thought you were just drifting, wasting time. I was wrong, I nodded. Not out of forgiveness yet, but because finally the truth was no longer mine to carry alone. Ryan looked up, and for the first time in years I saw real respect in his eyes. You're not just smart, he said. You're brave. I didn't cry. I didn't explode. I just felt light. Because the truth doesn't have to be loud to be heard. And all their assumptions, the ones they clung to like family heirlooms, were now lying shattered at their feet. The room felt like someone had ripped off a mask we'd all been wearing for years. And now for the first time, my family was looking at me not through filters of pity or pre-written roles, but as I truly was. Dad leaned forward, elbows on his knees, voice low and measured like he was negotiating a contract. Lauren, he said, I know you had your reasons for hiding it, but tonight, we need to talk openly. I nodded. That's fair. Mom slid a little closer, her hands ringing nervously in her lap. All those times you came home, she whispered, there was always something in your eyes, like you were somewhere else. I thought maybe you were just tired of us. I met her gaze, soft but firm. I wasn't tired of you. I was tired of pretending. Madison still hadn't spoken, but her eyes were glassy. I could see it, the unraveling. Not of anger, not of guilt, but confusion. A deep internal reckoning. Why didn't you ever ask what I wanted? I said, my voice calm but deliberate. Why did every honest thing I said get met with a joke? She swallowed hard. Because you made me feel small, she said. You didn't need approval. You just moved forward. And that scared me. I didn't expect that, but I felt it deep in my chest because it was honest. I turned to Ryan. What about you? What did you think of me all these years? He leaned back in his chair, exhaling slowly. Honestly, I thought you were the only one not playing the game. Now I get it. You weren't playing because you were out fighting a real war. I smiled not with pride or vindication, but with quiet relief. Because for the first time, I didn't have to explain why I deserved a seat at this table. We'd begun a conversation, not a performance, not a routine, a real one. And maybe for the first time, that was the beginning of something like family. I always imagined that if the truth ever came out, my family would either explode or shut me out. What I never pictured was this the soft quiet after the storm, the tentative glances, the words slow but real. Madison spoke first. "I'm sorry, Lauren," she said, and her voice didn't sound like hers. It wasn't polished, confident, or biting. It was unsure, human. I was so obsessed with being the best, she continued, that I didn't realize I was constantly demeaning the only person in this family actually doing something that mattered. I didn't respond right away. Apologies are delicate, and in the Mitchell family they were rarer than snow in July. But I looked her in the eye. "Thank you for saying that." And I meant it. Mom reached across the table and took my hand, something she hadn't done in years. "You've always been strong, Lauren," she said, her voice cracking. "Stronger than I ever understood. And that scared me, but now I know I should have been proud." My throat tightened, not because of the praise, but because someone had finally heard me. Dad placed his glass down, his usually firm posture softened. "I used to think value came from titles, from success you could measure," he said quietly. "Now I know it comes from courage, from doing the right thing even when no one's applauding." I nodded. The tears didn't fall, but they hovered, ready, waiting. Ryan leaned forward. "Do you think you could give us a chance to do better?" I looked around the table at people I once thought I'd outgrown, and now they looked like people trying, people learning. "We start with the truth," I said. "No more pretending, no more narratives. Just honesty about who we are." They nodded. That room, once a stage for performance, had become something else. Not perfect, but possible. 3 months after that night at the Fairmont, when my secret life was dragged into the light without warning, I did something I never imagined. I invited my family to dinner at my home. Not a restaurant, not a black tie gala, just my Lincoln Park condo, the one they used to call cute as if that word softened the blow of dismissive. I kept it simple, low, candlelight red wine, roasted lamb with rosemary potatoes. On the shelf near the dining table for the first time, I displayed my DEA awards and commendations, things I'd once hidden like they were shameful secrets. Mom arrived first, holding a bottle of wine and giving me a hug that didn't feel rehearsed. "You look happier than the last time I saw you," she said. And this time, I believed her. Dad didn't say much, but I caught him glancing at the photos of my team, pausing at the silver crescent plaque. He gave a slow nod. No words, just recognition. Ryan came in with the curiosity of a kid at a museum. He asked about sting operations, how we tracked cartel money across borders. For the first time, we weren't just siblings, we were talking like equals, like teammates. Madison arrived last with Lily in tow. She wasn't dressed like the boardroom Madison I was used to, no heels, no sharp blazer, just a gray sweater and a small notebook in hand. "I quit," she said simply. "I'm consulting for a nonprofit now, helping build their community campaign strategy. I guess I wanted to do something that actually means something." I blinked. "You're serious?" For the first time, she said, and smiled unguarded. Dinner wasn't perfect. There were awkward pauses, stumbles in conversation, but no one was pretending anymore. We didn't become a picture-perfect family overnight, but that night, for the first time, we started becoming something real, something new. The next morning, I packed in silence. Tactical gear, encrypted credentials, 2 secure phones, all the usual pieces of another operation. I'd done this so many times, but this time, it felt different. I stood in the doorway of my Lincoln Park condo for a beat longer than usual. That space used to be my bunker where I hid from judgment, from misunderstanding, from myself. Now it felt like home. Not because of what was in it, but because I no longer had to hide anything within it. The text came at 6:04 a.m. Red code, mobilization, destination Arizona, briefing at base Eero 900. I typed back 3 words. Copie, en route. On the way to the airport, my personal phone buzzed. A message from Madison Travel Safe. Call me when you can. I want to tell you about our new campaign. No cosmetics this time. I smiled. Then from Ryan, still waiting on that money tracing diagram. Step 4 makes 0 sense. And from Mom, I'm proud of you. And I'll always worry. Both can be true. I read each one like closing the last pages of a long book one with too many blank chapters, too many crossed out lines. But a real ending. At the airport, I didn't look back. I didn't need to. I'd left Chicago dozens of times, but this was the first time I left without hiding. I am Lauren Mitchell, federal agent, daughter, sister. And for the first time in my life, I am fully myself.